Thank you for tuning in to Stories in Your Hands with Cynthia Clark, the podcast about creating the life you want regardless of your story. This podcast is sponsored by loveinyourhands.com, the place to go to find long-lasting love using the most innovative and accurate algorithm based in scientific palmistry. Tired of superficial connections? Start your free Soulmate Connection membership today at loveinyourhands.com. Now here's your host, Cynthia Clark, palm reading consultant and compatibility expert. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. I want to introduce a new format for the show. The show has been Life is in Your Hands for the last 51 episodes. And it has been a joy to bring this podcast to you. And I'm very grateful that I've had this opportunity to share how to be the driver in your life and how to empower you in your life. However, I'm going to be true to my theme and my brand, and that is Stories in Your Hands. For those of you who don't know, I actually published a book about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, called Stories in Your Hands. And I feel like that really is what we're talking about. So it's all about creating the life you want regardless of your story. And we all have stories, and you know, those stories really do mold us and shape us into who we are. And we can choose to be a victim of that story, or we can choose to come out of whatever the lesson was and empower ourselves to be moving into the life that we want to live. So I am officially announcing our new name, but the theme is still going to be roughly the same. And I'm also going to make sure that I bring palmistry into every episode, because that is who I am. Your hands tell you everything about you, and it's so important that you know what they say. So I'm glad that I have this opportunity to share with you all, and I truly, truly appreciate your listening. And I want to bring you the stories that really matter to you. So that is my goal and my focus. And I am bringing guests on who are going to really be able to help you and guide you in your life and give you some fantastic information. So that is what we're here for. So today I wanted to start out with a little bit of palm reading lesson, which is going to help us understand isolation and suffering. Okay, which sounds really scary, right? It's like, oh no, what if I have these markers? Well, the good news is it doesn't matter what markers you have in your hands, you can change them and you can move them into a positive, okay? But I do believe that knowing who you are through your hands is actually very important. And you probably already know from just your looking at your life, knowing where you are in your life. So if you are in the suffering mode, well, you probably know that you probably have these markers already, so it shouldn't come as a surprise, right? So we're going to be real honest on this show as well. And not to beat you up or beat anybody up, but to just help you. I mean, that's ultimately what we're here for. So, okay, so first off, there is an isolation marker that is in your hands. And so if you look at your hand and you hold it up and you spread out your fingers, okay, does the little finger want to kind of jut away from the other fingers? Okay, your little finger is called Mercury. And Mercury is your finger of communication, but it's also your finger of intimacy and connection. Okay, so if this finger wants to just be all by itself, then you have had some periods in your life, probably over an extended period of time, where you have felt isolated. Okay, now it also has a positive side. It shows you're kind of a quirky person and probably more open to alternative forms of thought. So there's always positive, negative aspects to markers. Okay. But yeah, so take a look at that little finger. And the next thing I want to point out is called your sorrow star, which is actually a set of lines in the hand. By the way, all lines can change. Okay. So most people don't realize this, but on both hands, your lines change over time. I've actually tracked my hands for over 10 years now. And wow, have I seen some changes, which in a lot of ways, that's good because I was struggling a lot over the years. But the sorrow star just represents somebody who really is feeling that victim energy and oftentimes associated with depression. So that's why it's called the sorrow star. And it also can be somebody who really is just attracting that into their lives. So it's almost like they can't, it's like they can't get out of this cycle. So they're stuck in a negative pattern. It's going to be located between your headline, which is the line that goes straight across your hand horizontally, and your lifeline, which is, of course, usually the strongest line in your hand that wraps around your thumb ball. Okay, so right in between these two lines, you've got what's called the plane of Mars, which is sort of where the hand sort of indents a little bit. It's like right in the middle part of your palm. So in between those two lines, you would see like a little Star of David, like like three little lines that intersect. And it would be right there all by itself. That is called the sorrow star. Okay, so just take a look at your own hands and kind of see where you're at with those two markers. Hope you enjoyed today's palmistry lesson. And now we're going to bring on our very special guest for today. We've got JamesOlivia Hillman, who is a relational life and leadership coach with the mission. I love this mission: more joy, more connection, and less suffering. Yay. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia. I'm really excited and I can't stop staring at my palms right now. I might have to hold one of my hands up to the camera and ask you to take a look at some point and at my sorrow star and see what's going on there.
Yes, well, this is a minor marker, so not everybody has one. And hopefully you don't have one, but it is, stars can show up all over the hands. Some of them are actually very positive, but some are more of a challenge. And of course, I look at challenges as opportunities.
You
So,
know, as you were talking about the pinky and the isolation and the sorrow star, I was sort of wondering, like, do I have these markers and are these the things that push me into doing the work that I do?
indeed, it's your hands can definitely reveal a lot of information about you, and I believe they're the roadmap. So, yeah, they really do guide us in everything. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your story since we're talking stories in your hands.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like you got into what you're doing, and give us a little bit of your backstory.
Um, so I came into coaching through, it feels like lifetimes of other careers, but specifically into relational life coaching and relational leadership coaching because, you know, one of my hands, I'm going to just keep bring this back to hands. And I think,
Okay,
I know
sure.
that you're interviewing me, but I have so many questions for you now. So,
That's okay.
um, so one of my hands, it doesn't seem very, like my pinky's not sticking very far out. And the other one, it sticks farther out. Like my right hand, my pinky's like all like, hey, hey, I'm over here.
Uh-huh, sure.
And so as you were leading us through this little lesson, like this mini lesson, I was like, oh, okay, that might explain a lot about why in much of my life I have felt kind of, I was an only child. I have mixed race ancestry. I'm non-binary, like I don't fit into the, male, female, boy, girl gender binary. So there are all these ways of being other, like
Mm-hmm.
oh, one of these things is not like the others. And I think you can go through life feeling somewhat isolated and in feeling different, and that's situational and systemic, and then you're bringing it back into, and also this might be a thing that's written in my hands. This is the story that's part of my design. um and so I have been, I don't know if obsessed is too strong a word, probably not, with with the way that we the way that we engage in relationships, not just with each other, but like how we're in relationship with our ideas about ourselves, and how we're in relationship with the world around us, and how we're in relationship with our work and with our bodies and our communities. And like, to
Mhm.
me, everything is a relationship. And
Right.
so I'm
Yeah,
always looking at things through that lens.
indeed. Yeah, you actually had on your website, "We belong to each other," which I love that, that connectedness. Because yeah, I think a lot of people do feel isolated a lot of the time. And it's like and unfortunately our society kind of brings that in too, because it's like, okay, you're either, you know, a Democrat or a Republican. It's like, well, what if I'm neither? It's like, now what?
Like, what if I'm a radical socialist? I don't know.
Yeah, it's like sometimes I feel like we as a society try to separate things.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, how can we bring it back to be more like we're really together, you know?
Hmm.
And we're all humans, and that's the one thing I love about hands too. It's like it doesn't matter what part of the world you're from, you've got hands. you
Mostly
know?
everyone, right? Mostly
Yeah,
everyone.
unless you've lost them or had a birth defect or whatever, everybody has a set of hands. So how can we bring more of that belongingness into our existence? Like, what would you say about that?
So that's a real question for me. I'm like, that's a huge question.
I know, but it's one I think is really important.
Yeah, I even just asking the question for me is a way of doing the thing.
Hmm.
Like, even just recognizing that, like, hey, that's possible. It's possible for us to understand that we are connected, to understand that we live in a, like a physical ecosystem together, but we also live in a spiritual and psychological and political and relational ecosystem with
Hmm.
each other. And there's nothing that we can do to one another that doesn't affect the whole system that we live in, and therefore also affect us.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like we're on the pool. If you pee in the pool, you peed in the pool you're in. Like,
Yeah, that makes sense. Now the pool's dirty, dang it.
right. And so there's nothing that we're doing to one another, or you know in disregarding one another, that we're not doing to ourselves to some extent.
Hmm.
So even just asking the question, even just acknowledging, like, okay, well, how do we belong to one another, is recognizing that we do. Like, how can
Okay.
we?
Right. So first, it always goes back to awareness.
Hmm.
But yeah, awareness leads to the answer, but it also leads to the change that we want to produce. So,
Yeah. Are you familiar at all with Barbara J. Love?
hmm, tell us more.
I I wish I could tell you more about Barbara J. Love, and I'll have to probably learn more. But she has a framework for, it's called developing a liberatory consciousness, and it starts with awareness as, like, this is the first thing. Awareness is the first thing, and
Yes.
it moves to analysis, action, and accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a social justice framework for liberatory consciousness, and it's looking at the whole thing as though we can't just move from an awareness to, hey, now I'll do some action and everything will be better. It's, okay, now I have this awareness and let's do some analysis around, okay, like historically and systemically, how did we get here? Like,
Hmm.
who's involved? Who's impacted? What have we been up to get to this place? And how can we learn from that so that our next action is right action? So we're not just going around doing things that mess things up more.
Right. Stop peeing in the pool.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know, will this ink help? Like, no, it's an action, but it's not right action, right? So,
Yeah.
and then the next part of that being accountability, which to me is all about relationships. It's like, to whom are we accountable? Like, are we accountable to, like, corporations? Are, do we just say, okay, we're accountable to our shareholders? Or do we take that awareness that we now have of interconnectedness and the analysis that we have around it and the action and go, oh, well, if we're back to awareness and we're aware that we're interconnected, how many voices are we listening to? How can we make sure that we're um, behaving in such a way as to honor our awareness?
Mm. So it kind of goes back to being authentic, wouldn't you say? Like being true to who we really are and not, because it seems like if we're not being true to ourselves, we're going to start to create these problems.
I think that's a huge part of it. And tell me what you mean. Tell me more about what you mean by being true to yourself. Like, what's an example that you have?
Well, to me, it always goes back to the hands
Mm-hmm.
because your hands tell you who you are, and
Uh-huh.
they also show your pain, like I just pointed out, but
Mm-hmm.
they also show you your potential to be like who can you be? Like let's say for example you're meant to be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that actually shows up in the hands in a couple of ways. It can show up in your fingerprints, meaning that you came in to be a leader because your fingerprints formed 5 months before you're born, or it can be something that you're developing. So if
Mm-hmm.
it's on your passive hand, you did mention the two hands, so now I'll mention it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because there is a difference. So let's say you have a leadership star on your passive hand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which by the way, if anybody's wondering what that looks like, it's going to be a star, just like the sorrow star. So three intersecting lines that look like a Star of David, but it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be underneath your index finger. Okay, so that's what's called your Jupiter mount.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the mark of the leader or the high achiever. Let's say you have that on your passive hand, but not on your active hand. Well, to me, that would represent that you're a potential leader. You could develop leadership skills. You could, um, it represents an opportunity for you to be authentic. If it's already on your active hand, well, then you already have all the skills and you just need to do it.
Okay. So
Okay.
when you say passive hand and active hand, is that like your dominant
Yeah.
hand?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, usually the hand that you write with is called your
Mhm.
active, and the hand that you don't write with is called your passive. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
so there are definitely differences on the two hands.
How fascinating. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, since you brought it up, it's like, oh yeah, people probably should know that. So yeah, so does that make sense? Like, is that something that makes sense to you?
Okay. I think you're answering my question. So when you say authenticity and being true to who you are,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm what I'm hearing is, if I have this awareness of belonging and connectiveness, and I have this analysis around, how we got away from it, and and I want to couple that analysis with authenticity and being true to who I am, so that my action is correct
Mm-hmm.
and that my accountability isn't going to be, like, really painful when I come through
Exactly.
the action. um, so say that I have a leadership star
Mm-hmm.
on one or both of my hands.
Yes.
Would you have it on one or on both, or would it only ever show up on one?
It could show up on one. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, because it looks like I have like a little baby one on my passive hand, and that's hilarious to me given what I'm doing this year.
Awesome.
Um, so say that I, had a leadership star on one or both of my hands, and I knew that to be true to myself and to be authentic, that my action and to be aligned, my action would be one of leadership rather than just waiting for someone to tell me what to do or hoping
Yes.
somebody else would figure out the problem.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
okay, that does make sense to me if I'm hearing you right.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly what I was implying.
Okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool.
so yeah, and I think a lot of people do already know a lot of their gifts, especially as they get older,
Mhm,
they naturally come out. If people are constantly asking you for advice, it's like, well, that's not just a random thing.
mhm.
It's because you're good at giving advice. you know
Okay, okay. So now I'm thinking about how this comes back to belonging.
yes.
And it feels almost like the more you're willing to own who you are, the more you and live in that, the more you kind of can, I don't know if settle into is the right phrase. I'll stew on that for a minute.
Hmm.
But that you can be in a place of belonging, like belonging
Yeah.
in your own story, to your own story, belonging in your skin and in your life.
Right.
Um,
Instead of apologizing for it,
mhm,
because I feel like, especially over the last 10 years of my own coaching with people, there's a lot of apology that goes on. And it's sort of like, wow, why do we do that? Why do we apologize for being who we are? Like if you're a high achiever, it's almost like that's bad sometimes for those people because it's like they feel, again, it goes back to the isolation. It's like, well, if I don't dumb myself down, I don't connect to people, just as an example. So
yeah.
it's like, wow, that would suck, you know? Like, really?
Yeah, this is a I don't say this on my site. Like you pulled out the we belong to each other. And yes, I so believe that. And a thing that I tell people all the time is more you is better. Like
Yes.
in your leadership, in your relationships, more you is better. And we
Mhm.
were talking about this right before we started recording, where
Yes.
you were like, I'm changing the name of the show. It's still going to be the show, but I'm bringing more of myself to it. And I got really excited. That's what I got really excited about.
Yes. Well, and that's, and I think that's why this topic is so, so important because, I mean, just for me personally, I have been searching for this for the last, I don't even know how many years, forever. Like ever since I was a kid, I feel like I've been searching for understanding who I really am and why I'm here. Like what is the purpose of my life? I think a lot of people do ask that, and I try to answer that through the hands.
Hmm.
But I think ultimately it's like, wow, we almost have to discover it for ourselves through all the lessons that we have and all the experiences and the people who mirror us. So, yeah, again, it comes to the belonging. It's like, okay, I've got people in my life who, they have their stuff going on, but they're showing me little pieces of myself. And it was so funny I just got back from San Diego and I did this amazing conference, which was all about podcasting. And I'm super grateful for that experience. But what really hit home for me, and it was at the very end of the conference, I ran into probably four people who showed me exactly who I'm trying to help. People who are looking for their soulmate, people who have lost, like either through death or divorce, they've lost love and they feel lost. I mean, yeah, when we're not connected anymore and we want to be in a relationship, that can be really devastating. It was for me when I got divorced after 19 years. So it's like, wow. And of course, that's just part of the story.
Hmm.
Of course, you are an individual, right? and you're also a collective.
Yeah.
So it's about finding that balance and figuring that out. And I just, I think a lot of people struggle with this.
And by a lot, do you mean like almost everybody on the planet?
Yes, yes, I definitely would say that. And if you don't struggle with this, you're probably just in some sort of denial or some lack of awareness, you know?
Right, right. Um, okay, so when you talking about the podcast convention that you were at, and these people who came up to you asking you like, can you help me with this exact thing? Like, here you are. I'm so glad our paths had crossed. Um, had you made the decision going into that convention that or that conference that you were going to show up with more of you and let people see more of you so that they could find you in that way?
Yes, because getting up on stage in front of 200 people in person is for me, it's very scary, and it's not at all my comfort zone.
Hmm.
So, and that's actually in my hands. The reluctant high profile person is my life lesson. So I have a shyness factor and a don't really look at me factor.
You say reluctant high profile.
Yes.
Okay, so you are meant to be visible and you do not want to. That's like the
Yes.
okay, okay.
I know, isn't it weird? I have a Star of Apollo on my hand, which is basically like, look at me, I'm in the spotlight.
Hmm.
Creativity in the spotlight, that's what that is. And then my fingerprints are the exact opposite of like, oh no, you gotta hide out. Like, don't show anything of yourself to the world. Just like be a hermit. And it's like, wow, okay, so we oftentimes will have these little dilemmas
Hmm.
or these complete contrasts in our hands. And it's like, but if we choose to actually go through the difficulty or the
Hmm.
pain or the stress, I would just call it stress because
Yeah.
I I certainly can get up on stage. I managed to pull it off.
Clearly.
But what it does is it opens the door to be more of you, which is, I those people wouldn't know who I am if I didn't do that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know what I stand for and what I represent and what I can help them with. Absolutely true.
Do you find that with these sort of tension things in the hands, like, okay, reluctant high profile, like, hey, look at me, I'm meant to be in the spotlight, and also nobody look at me, I would like to go hide out, that that we sometimes read into that like there's a false binary, this either or, like either I have to be hiding out or I have to be in the spotlight, and it turns into a conflict rather than a thing that we can go, oh hey, I have the Star of Apollo and I can give this gift, like I can be in the spotlight and share my gift with the world, and this other thing in my fingerprints is telling me, and in order to keep giving that, in order to be sustainable in that, I'm going to have to take care of myself in certain ways that, like, I'm going to have to choose to not isolate but like withdraw a bit,
Hmm.
care for myself in solitude or out of the spotlight so that the spotlight time can happen again.
Yes, I definitely feel like people need to embody both aspects. So
Hmm.
yeah, which is probably why I live in Sedona now, because it's like such a retreat space. It's
Hmm.
fantastic. I love it. And I can feel like, okay, yeah, I can just be, comfortable in my home. And, and this is sort of like right now what we're doing.
Hmm.
I'm totally comfortable in my house right now. I'm completely by myself, which is kind of nice too. And I'm comfortable with that. And yet I'm being my spotlight person by sharing with not just with you, but with the whole audience. And so it's like, wow, that can exist simultaneously,
Yeah,
isn't
a way to
it?
integrate all the
Yeah.
parts of you.
Yeah. And if we can learn and, I love your take on this as well, but if we can learn how to do that in a
Mhm.
way that works for you, I think we can be really happy. I think that's actually a pathway to joy.
Yeah. It feels like a way also to be more authentically connected with other people as well, because it's not like a, hey, I'm in the spotlight and this is what you get, and then when I'm hiding away, everybody that I connected with in the spotlight has to go away because these two worlds are separate. It's like I can integrate these things, and like you said, right now you get to connect with your entire audience from the comfort and, coziness of your own home, and also we get to have this conversation,
Yeah,
and it doesn't um yeah, it doesn't sort of blow up your Star of Apollo and make it have to be separate.
exactly. Yeah. And, I think a lot of people need to just ask themselves, how can I belong more? What can I do more? Like you said at the beginning of our talk, it's like just asking the right questions, I think is really key. So maybe we're asking the wrong questions, like a lot of people, you know what I mean? Like if we wake up, let's say we're in a really funky, crappy spot. It's like, how some people maybe wake up and go, oh, this is probably going to be another crappy day, and oh, I got to go to work. Oh my God, I'm going to just meet this person who always bothers me. And it's almost like they just set themselves up for failure right at the beginning of their day, rather than saying, how can I belong more today? Or how can I feel more alive today?
Mhm.
And if they ask that question instead, what's going to show up?
That to me is huge. I actually just had a conversation with my partner about this exact thing because he was talking about something that is causing him some suffering in his life. Um, and I was like, you're speaking as though this is fact, like that that it's an undeniable, inarguable fact that what you're experiencing is the only truth. I was like, what if it's possible that something else could be possible? Like that something else could be.
Yeah,
Would you be open to that? Like would you be willing for another thing to be true?
exactly.
And he was like, I totally believe that same thing and I don't know why I've been talking like that.
Hmm.
And I agree, like sometimes we're not even asking questions. Um when I talk about the ways that, am I allowed to swear on your show? Would you
Uh,
prefer I didn't?
I would prefer you didn't. I do have a
Okay.
clean lyrics in my advertising.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. So instead of the F word, I will call it um, heckery. Okay. How about that?
Okay,
So
sounds
I call it
good.
anti-relational heckery. And the things that we do, I umbrella them into four main things that almost all of our bad behavior falls under: attack, defend, avoid, and control.
Hmm.
And then the antidotes to those being to witness, inquire, presence, and regard. And inquiry seems to be such a huge antidote to almost all of the judgments that we have that cause us to suffer,
Hmm.
is just asking, like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? What could be different? Is this true? Like, what do
Uh,
I want instead?
right.
Or what do
Yeah.
I want, period? I think what do I want
Yes.
is one of the questions that so many of us forget to ask when we're trying to, fix all the struggles and all the suffering,
Hmm.
and the ways in which we're disconnected.
Hmm.
Like we seem to think that if somebody else would behave differently, our relationship could be better, or our life could be better,
Hmm.
and we forget to ask, like, well, what do I want? Because we know
Yes.
so much about what we don't want.
Exactly. Great question. Okay, so everybody, this is your assignment for today. Ask what it is that you want and stop and listen for the answer. Okay, give yourselves 2 minutes to do that and see what comes up. I think that's great advice. So thank you for sharing that. So how do people work with you, and what are you, is there anything you're offering right now? How do people reach you?
I am so glad you asked. Thank you. That's a really beautiful question. A lot of my work is one-on-one. So the way that most people work with me is to have conversations with me.
Yay.
One-on-one coaching. I just recently taught my first uh, class remotely online. We did it all by Zoom, so everybody got a chance to meet with each other twice a week, and that was in July and August, and it's called Regard. It was an 8-week exploration of right relationship. I'm launching it again right now. It starts in October, in the middle of October, and it will be a 10-week class, very, very small group of us sitting and having conversations and explorations around what it means to be in right relationship with each other, with our work, with our bodies, with our communities, ourselves, our spirituality.
Okay, great. And how do people sign up for that? Where do they go?
First, they would go to inquisitivehuman.com,
Okay.
and the homepage will take you right to the class. Um, if anybody wants to talk with me, I love when people just book a conversation with me. So you can schedule to sit with me for 30 minutes over Zoom, and we can get to know each other and talk about whether or not that's a place that you would want to be, because it's not a, hey, I'm going to sign up for this class and you're going to download a video and do some homework. Like, there's no homework, there are no videos. It's you actually show up and you are the material. So it can be pretty intensive, and you might want to get to know me first before you commit to 10 weeks of talking with me for 90
Well,
minutes at a time.
that's why we're here on the show too.
Yeah.
To know you.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
terrific.
And then in January, and I'm sorry, in February, Regard will become a 1-year community of practice, not meeting every week, but
Mm.
really taking that practice of, what am I doing? What's my anti-relational heckery that I engage in at home and at work and
Yeah.
in my community? What am I up to?
Uh-huh.
And how can I instead witness and inquire and regard and present things in ways that put me in right relationship with myself and right relationship with other people, and do that over a course of time that allows me to essentially become more me in my relationships.
I love that. Yay. Okay, well, that sounds awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for
And
having me. It's nice to talk with you again.
yes, thank you. And everybody out there, just remember to keep creating the life you want, regardless of your story. And have a fantastic day. Thank you for listening to Stories in Your Hands. Please rate, review, and subscribe to show your support. This podcast is sponsored by loveinyourhands.com, the place to find the secret ingredients to your soulmate. Start your free Soulmate Connection membership today using the most innovative and accurate algorithm to match you to potential long-lasting love, all at loveinyourhands.com.